It's the writing life.
The writing life.
Not the writer's life.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen W. Long, and this is The Writing Life. If you've watched the show a little bit, there's a good chance that you're going to remember or recognize the fellow sitting next to me. That's Frank Lisciandro. Frank is a lifelong filmmaker, photographer, an author of several books. Frank was intimately involved in the music scene in the 60s, and he's really the go-to guy when the subject is The Doors or Jim Morrison. And he's been an advisor in that capacity. He's also my friend. And we were hanging out the other day, and Frank had a proposal for me, and it was to switch roles here. I don't know if the motivation was revenge, or we're going to find out about that. But so Frank, there you go. It's your show.
Well, thanks, Steve. I've got a couple of pages of questions to ask you.
Okay.
Some about your writing and some about writing in general. So let me start with this. I'd like to ask you about how many episodes do you think you've made, and how many writers have you interviewed?
I don't know the exact number, but it's something more than 100 episodes. To pick something, this is probably 108 or 10, something like that. There have been some duplications. You were an example, but I suspect that the number of writers has got to be around 100.
You must have met some, let's say, famous or well-selling authors during that time. And given that, what might you have learned from them?
Okay. You're right. I mean, I have said on more than one occasion, this is Little McMinnville, and how do we get these people? It's just kind of cool. So there's two things. One is that folks have come here and have been interviewed. Among them, Bill Champlin, and in fact, you were in the studio that day. Bill Champlin is a two-time Grammy-winning songwriter. He was a member of the group Chicago, and just was terrific to meet him and to have him as a guest. We also had Therese O'Neill, who is a New York Times bestseller, and her book, the first book was, I think it was Victorian era women's undergarments, and which was a fun topic. And then her follow-up book was, in fact, I'm sorry, the first book was named Unmentionables, and the second was named Ungovernable, and that was child rearing in the Victorian age. So those are some folks that have been here. Because I'm sort of active in reaching out to writing related events, I've met, Ray Bradbury. That was fun. I got to drive him around because he didn't drive. And I actually have a picture with Mr. Bradbury, and I keep that around to remind me of the time I had hair. Yeah, I've met Sue Grafton. We were communicating. She was nice enough to write me back. And I was in Southern California, and she had a book signing in Santa Barbara. And my daughter Jennifer threw her in the car, and we drove up there and got to talk a little bit. And it was early. I couldn't say it was a writing career. I was writing. And I gave her some work, and she was very nice. I'm sure it was awful work, but she was generous. And she said, she encouraged me to take some classes, which I did. Anne Lamott, I met her. A thrill for me was Jim Harrison. Mm-hmm. And he had just won the Pulitzer for Independence Day. And I saw him in the bar at Squaw Valley. And made my way through the crowd, and I stood beside him, and he looked at me, and I said, Mr. Harrison, I just wanted to meet you. It was just it's such a pleasure. And I started to walk away, and he said, no, get back here, sit down and have a drink with me, which was terrific. And he asked me about my writing, so that was a fun time.
Is there any single thing that one of them might have said in the course of the interviews that stuck with you as being worthy to remember as a writer? Again,
nothing stands out to me in the interview. Aside from that, well, I didn't meet John Lesquin, but I attended a lecture, a presentation that he made. And one of the things that he said that has stuck with me, and maybe I can get an example of that later, he said, put your character on the page and have them do something. So that was good advice. Ray Bradbury said, you have to jump off the cliff every day and build your wings on the way down. And I took that to mean a certain risk tolerance, maybe, but also confidence that you can build them on the way down. So there's a couple.
Great.
Yeah.
Changing your subject.
Yeah.
What's the best book that someone has given you as a gift?
Oh, gosh. I normally get them myself. So, probably I'm going to say Flying at Night, which is a poetry collection by Ted Kooser. And that was really influential to me. I have since, on a couple of occasions, written to Mr. Kooser. For people who don't know, he was the poet laureate of Kansas and later became the poet laureate of the United States. But to me, there's nobody that comes close to his work. So that was highly influential.
Just to remind people that several weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, you interviewed the Poet Laureate of Oregon.
Yeah.
And she was a delight.
Ellen Watterson, you ought to know, you were the cameraman.
I was.
Yeah.
So if they haven't seen that yet, well, they should dial back and find it.
Sure. All of these shows, I think that the studio here, McMinnville Community Media, I believe has a Facebook page, or maybe what would it be, not a website, a channel, a YouTube channel. And you can see them there, or I do. And so if you went to YouTube and looked, used the keywords, The Writing Life, Stephen W. Long, you're going to find a bunch of them. And she's on there as well.
Including me.
Including you. Yeah, that's right.
Wow. So let's get back into your reading. What are you reading right now?
Oh, I am rereading Annie Proulx's Close Range. And two people, she's one, and Cormac McCarthy. I think that they are such powerful writers. I've said that the two of them, they remind me of the literary version of Stevie Ray Vaughan. They're just so in command. And with both of them, it's like when you pick up the book, whatever it is, buckle up, because here we go. But anyway, I think they're terrific. So that's what I'm reading now.
What kind of reader were you as a young person, let's say grammar school kid? Were you a devoted reader, or did you ignore books?
I wasn't much of a reader at that age, but I do remember, so we lived in Davenport, Iowa. Obviously it was a different time. And on occasion, my mother would give my brother David and me some money, $2 or something, and we would walk down and catch the bus and ride it into downtown and spend the afternoon at the movie, and which was a double feature and cartoons and news and so on. And then we would leave there and go, maybe it was Peterson's, I can't remember, and buy a book. And I got Steve Canyon, and he got Tom Swift Jr. And David's a better reader than I am. And it wasn't a long bus ride, but he would be just about finished with the book by the time we got home. And I barely cracked it open. So I wasn't a good reader when I was young.
What about as a teenager? Did that change? Did you find more pleasure in books?
Some, everybody was reading The Hobbit, and I remember David Copperfield had a big impact on me. So, and maybe I started to read Michener then as well. But again, I wasn't much of a reader until I got to college.
Aside from school assignments, what's the first piece of writing that you can remember you did without being a school assignment? A poem,
Okay.
a sketch, a novel?
Yeah, no, dash that off. It's funny. Arrogant is another word, but funny, let's say. I wrote a poem about the universe, and I sent it to Stephen Hawking. And he was, of course, very disabled. But I got an answer back from his assistant. And I wish I could find that. I've got it somewhere. So that's the first thing that I remember, I guess, writing for pleasure. We may get to my college writing, but let's see how this goes.
Well, let's go right into the college writing then.
All right.
Tell us about what kind of writing you were doing. Was it fiction, nonfiction? Was it for pleasure, or was it to show a girlfriend?
That would not have been successful. No, so what I'm thinking of is I was an English major, and I went to Cal Poly in Pomona, and at that time, a requirement for graduation was a senior project. And nothing interested me except writing. And I approached my advisor and told him that, and he didn't tell me I couldn't, but he didn't encourage it. I think he wanted like more of a research paper, Sylvia Plath or something. And so I did the story that I wanted to do, which was, the concept I think was not too bad. It was a dystopian tale about sort of the collapse of civilization because we had overproduced so much. We'd made so much waste we couldn't get rid of it all. And the protagonist of the story, I named him Plumb, P-L-U-M-B, because it's sort of a construction term, something that's true or vertical. And I thought that was so clever. And the people, Plum was one of the citizens, were pretty much taken care of so that they wouldn't go out and produce things. And he spent his days roaming around the piles of trash and came across a toolbox like you might have work on your car, and instinctively realized that they were powerful. The tools are powerful. And he came to that conclusion because tools were forbidden, and secreted this toolbox home and built a little altar, and there was a hole in the roof, and the sun would shine on it. And so he sort of adorized, is that the word? These tools. So it wasn't a terrible idea. It was a terrible production. It was embarrassingly bad, so bad that I didn't write anything again for, I don't know, 10 years or 15 years or something.
Was it so bad that you realized yourself that it was bad, or was the feedback bad from your advisor? Or
No, I beat him to it. I knew it was bad. Yeah.
And did you turn it in?
I did turn it in.
And did they accept it for your graduation?
Well, this is maybe more than you want to know. Because it was a part of a requirement for graduation, it was mandatory. The fella I gave it to lost it. And this is pre-computers and so on. But I had a carbon copy, an actual carbon copy that I turned in. And he lost that. And then when I went to talk to him about it, he was on sabbatical. So I never graduated. I did 6 years of college. I did everything they wanted, but I never actually got credit for my senior project. So
let's go back and get it for you.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I mean, it's a long time ago. In fact, actually, At that time, I was both married and had a good job. And I thought, what do I need a diploma for? So I never pursued that.
Well, let's get off the college level.
Yeah.
In your estimation, what are the tools a writer must learn to develop being a writer? Is it craft? Is it voice? Is it style? Is it all of the above and other things? What's the most important tool that a writer needs to get out and start working on a piece of writing?
So, I mean, as everybody knows, everything's important. But one that you didn't mention would be character development, which is another, depending on the kind of work you're doing, could be most important. Honestly, for me, it's voice. And I feel like if I can hear it in my head, I can write it. And I don't even mean the words exactly, you know, but it's like the attitude, if that makes sense. So I would say voice. In fact, we may get to this, but I've read a lot of Robert B. Parker, not so much for the story, but for the voice. It's a rhythm, it's a juxtaposition of dialogue and narration and so on. So that was important for me.
And Raymond Chandler is someone who I've read and reread, and he's got a voice that's distinctive, an attitude that's distinctive. And if young writers could get to the point where they understand what voice means through a writer who's successful, or even not successful, but that has made books in which there is a voice, I think that might be something.
Chandler, I just don't know that there's anybody better. One of the things about Chandler is when you read his work, you could follow, geographically, you could follow where the characters go because he has LA down like the back of his hand. You know where you're at with Raymond Chandler.
And even San Diego County.
Sure.
Because his characters travel there.
Yeah. You know what's funny about him, though, because I've read him as well, is some of the anachronisms because of the age. Like the saying, to drop a dime. They dropped a dime. Well, that doesn't mean anything now, but yeah. And actually, there's some things that would be racially objectionable now.
Absolutely.
And I don't remember this, but I suspect gender roles as well. So kids, if you're doing this at home, you can get the voice, but forget the other stuff.
Well, it's historical in some ways.
It is.
You know, to drop a dime was an expression used because a telephone call would cost a dime.
Yeah.
And so there are historical reasons for reading Chandler as well.
Well, we still say dial the phone, even though I don't know. I mean, I suppose there are rotary phones still, but.
What led you to write your first book? It's called There's a Somebody.
There's a Somebody.
Was it a newspaper story? An event? Is it something that happened in your life? Let's show them the book.
Yeah, so that's that one, which I'm proud of for a couple of reasons. One is I think it's pretty good, but it kind of got things started for me. So the way I came to that was I was in first a college class and then later invited to join Elizabeth George's small, intimate class lessons in her home.
Could I stop you a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Could you tell us a little bit about Elizabeth George for those people who haven't read her?
Yeah, so Elizabeth George is an internationally known, or bestseller internationally. In fact, I think her biggest market is Germany. But she writes British detective fiction. I don't know how many books she's got out, 20 maybe. And the BBC picked up her, 2 books to begin with and then contracted with her to write new material using those characters. And she's still writing. She's does great. I've said this to people, and I think it's not a bad analogy. When I was invited to join that little group, I think there were 6 of us in her home. I've said it would be like, and this will date me, but if you wanted to play basketball and Michael Jordan said, come over to the house, we'll shoot around, we'll talk a little bit. To me, that's the level that I was invited into. So.
And did you deserve it, do you think? I mean, in terms of what you had written up to that point.
Probably not. I honestly, I think she saw some potential.
And what did you show her?
It's interesting. There was a process, an application process, and it was that you had to bring your work, and they would critique it, and then the applicant had to leave, and they would discuss. And I remember that I was voted in unanimously.
Wow.
I don't really remember what I brought. I had written a short story for a contest, and it was called A Lasting Impression. And it was about a young lady trying to decide whether or not she should get a tattoo. And so that may be what I gave them. But I was with her 10 years. I mean, that was a big deal.
So is it important for a young writer, a starting writer, to have a mentor, someone who's professional, who knows the ropes not only of writing, but of the game of being a writer? Is that essential, do you think?
I don't think it's essential. I'm not even sure it's helpful. And I'll tell you why. Depending on how far along in your journey you are. I think a new writer can be so easily swayed that it takes away from them the opportunity to develop your own voice. It's a double-edged sword, because certainly there's a time when you want that kind of feedback, both about the work, but then if you want to, publish or sell it, there's that world as well, and they know that. But as an example, when Elizabeth started publishing, that world was a different world than today. She is real smart and real good, and so you would think that the outcome of that would be what happened, is that she's a popular published author. Had she not been maybe as good, maybe as developed yet, in that era, a publishing company, along with an agent, would bring you along. In fact, this happened to Michener. He wasn't very good. He was, I think, a reporter. Mm-hmm. But when he wrote his first novel or couple, they weren't very good. But they brought him along. They let him fail, or they let him evolve. Now, if you don't come out of the gate with something, a bestseller, it's really difficult to get book number 2. So that's a long way to say I'm not so sure that the business advice at that point is helpful. And in terms of craft, well, let me say this too. In terms of sharing something, absolutely, if you have an idea for a work, don't tell anybody. And the reason for that is that idea has energy, and it wants to be told. It wants to get out. If you tell somebody, it is out, and you've dispelled that energy. You got to write it down. Don't tell anybody. So I think, again, depending on where you're at in your journey, if you're not pretty confident about what you're doing, I think you're too easily, if not dissuaded, at least influenced. And maybe then it's not yours.
I know from our conversations that you're part of a writing group and have been for some time, local writing group.
Right, yeah.
And given what you just said, it would seem that you'd be somewhat cautious of bringing your material to that writing group. What makes it different for you than for a young writer?
Yeah. And I was in a writing group early on too, and I like I said, it's a double-edged sword, and I think I got some benefit out of that. So let me show, this thing is, this was produced by my not my critique group, the critique group I'm in. And I think the difference is that everybody has done this quite some time. They're confident enough in their work to accept or reject suggestions without being unduly influenced. And another little anecdote. When I was in the group at Elizabeth George's place, one of the students was, come on, Steve, Patty Smiley. And Patricia Smiley, you can look up her work. She's got, I think, 3 series out. Really, really a great writer. And I remember she brought some work and somebody made a suggestion. And you're not supposed to say anything as they go around. At the end, you know, you can respond. But when it came time for her to respond, she said, of that suggestion, "That's a great idea. Not for this book, but it's a great idea." And I think what that told me was she was confident enough to know, you don't think of everything yourself, but once it's presented, you know what to accept and what not to. And she was at that level. And I think the people in Easy Writers, the group I'm in now, are at that level.
Great.
Yeah.
So you think we've covered that area for young writers to know what a critique group is about?
Well, okay, well, let me say then, the way that I was taught to critique is this. When you look at a work, it doesn't help to say, this doesn't work for me, or to say, you know, you need to start over. That's not helpful. I was taught that when you read something from, you know, presented by another member, act as if you are the publisher and you've purchased this. It's yours now. And your only job at this point is to make it better. You see what I mean? You can't reject it. You're only making it better. And sometimes things need so much work, you have to judiciously pick something. So that's...
You're talking about constructive criticism.
Absolutely, yeah.
Something positive that the writer could take with them and maybe dwell on.
If I haven't said this, the first class I was in, my teacher was Dana Brookins, and she was absolutely perfect for me at that time. I was an older student, I was uncomfortable, I thought, you know, these kids are smart and what am I doing here? But she would not allow anything other than constructive criticism. And it was the perfect way to nurture all of us, certainly me.
Getting back to you as a writer, that is your technique. What do you use to hook your audience? And is it character development? Is it humor? Or maybe you don't think about using a hook to grab an audience?
I don't know that I'd use the word hook. I really go back to the couple of novels that I've written. Get the character on the page and have him do something. So that's one thing. Another thing, as I suppose this is a cliche to say, but I try to write what I would want to read. And well, here's another example. This is Old Hat. It was my second novel.
And we'll get to it.
Yeah. Ta-da. There you go. I think there's humor in that. So these 2 books, let me back up a little bit. These 2, how can I do this? Ta-da. Would be called literary works. And literary is distinct from popular in that a literary work it's character driven and there's an emphasis on language. A popular work is more plot driven and less of the other. So these are both literary. And I really worked hard at character development, which was preliminary to the start of writing. There's a lot of a kind of upfront work so that you know who these people are. But to me, if there's a hook, that's it. Is that I hope these characters are appealing, but appealing isn't always the right word. I'm thinking of Confederacy of Dunces.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that person is appealing, but they are engaging, and you sort of can't turn away. So if that answers the question.
Well, it's an interesting distinction, really, that modern novels are less plot-driven than novels of another generation or even another
Sure.
century.
Sure.
And some people claim that Hemingway might have started this tendency towards character-driven literary works.
Yeah.
Do you think those kinds of books become popular now because we've had more of them, or are they less popular? I mean, it seems to me that lots of crime fiction is popular, or lots of story fiction is popular, which has a plot in it.
Okay, so when you say popular, you don't mean successful. You mean
I don't mean good.
The characteristic of, or that category of being popular. Man, I think there's both. So
Okay.
I was thinking of, it's not a new book, it's new-ish, A Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. Just terrific, and it's really character, not plot. But again, you look at, I think Chandler, you had mentioned, or the Spencer novels, the Jesse Stone novels. You know, they're pretty shallow, I think, in terms of character. I mean, I like them, but it's really more about the action. It's more about the plot.
And you think that plot-driven is, versus literary, the plot-driven are more entertainment, and the other is a little bit more of learning about how people act in the world?
Yeah, if you had to make that distinction, I would say yes. Again, I've talked to Elizabeth about that, and ideally, it's both. You know, it's a great plot, and you really care about the characters. And if I had to pick for her work, I would say it's literary, even though they're murder mysteries. So, but she works hard at getting it all. And I think, well, now, two things about Elizabeth's work, I have to say. At one point, she was stuck in her development. You know, she halfway through the book and kind of didn't know where to go from there. And so she told it to her husband, and he said, well, kill somebody. And so she did, and then the plot took off again. But one of the things I learned from her, and especially I think in the genre of mystery, is the ending should be a surprise, and it should be inevitable. So when you look back, when you get to the end and look back, go, oh, I missed it. I didn't see that clue, but it should be there. You just need the red herring to not go there so quickly.
There's a lot more to talk about in this subject, because I think if we can name a bunch of writers, I could name J.D. Salinger, whose short stories I've read over and over again. And surely those stories are more character-driven rather than event-driven.
Oh, yeah. Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
You just talk about
or
Salinger.
the short stories, A Perfect Day for Banana Fish, or one of those short stories. They're wonderful stories because he gives us the characters, and he gives them to us in a way that they're defined as real human beings. And we get to love them or like them or not like them, but they're real.
Yeah.
And the plot doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And as you were saying that, I was thinking of, you know, pick a scene, a street side cafe, the beach, or something. We talk about being people watchers. Well, that's what you're doing with these books, is people watching.
Yes, very good. That's a very good way to look at it.
I
think. Let's talk about rewrites. You know, I've heard many authors speak about rewrites. Some claim to cross out and rewrite just about every page that they've previously written. How many drafts of your first novel did you make before you felt that it was complete and ready to present to an audience?
Okay.
Approximately.
I don't know that I said this earlier, so I'll say it now. This book was written as a result of a grant from the Elizabeth George Foundation.
Wow.
So there were some constraints in a sense that maybe you normally wouldn't have. So quarterly, the grant was for a year, and quarterly I would have to turn in my work. So I guess in that sense they were looking at it. I'd never written a novel before. All of a sudden I had a grant and I had to come up with a subject. And my first attempt, or I don't even know that it qualifies as an attempt, but I started off with the female character in this having abandoned her child. And it just didn't resonate. That's just, I mean, it's not that it never happens, but it just didn't feel right. And so I guess the first edit was, then I had to make the male protagonist abandon his child. Well, that's kind of wacky too. I mean, that's not, that's not somebody that you want to care for. And so then I had to come up with a reason that he would do that. And I worked my way through that. In fact, can I deviate just for a second? I was so, I don't know that this is a compliment. Well, I took it as a compliment. The neatest response I got on this book was a fella at my work had a copy, and I arrived early one morning and he was there, and he charged across the parking lot, angry, shaking, and he said, "I have never hated a protagonist like I hate your guy." And I thought, well, that's the coolest thing ever. Because he had a visceral reaction as if it was a real person. And so I felt like I'd done a good job. Anyway, back to the editing. I wrote this originally in third person past tense, and I turned it in like that. And so after a year, I had had 4, quarterly, I'd had 4 responses. Then the board that issued the grant gave me their suggestions, and I was asked, how long would it take you to implement these? Well, I'd never done that before, but I said, 3 months. Okay. So they gave me an extension on the grant for another quarter, and I did that. And it was still third person past tense. And I was sending it out to agents and so on. And the truth is, I didn't like it. And I thought to myself, the problem is you're trying to be Elizabeth George, and I'm not. I was trying to write like that. Coincidentally, right about that same time, I read Nick Hornby's High Fidelity.
Yeah.
And it struck me, this is the answer. It's first person, present tense. So the first person, what that gives you is, you see the world through his eyes. And so when he does dumb things, yes, they're dumb things, but you're processing it through that. And so you kind of know why he does it. Maybe you wouldn't do it, but you can see why he does it. And I think present tense brings an immediacy to it that was lacking before. So anyway, so that's how that came about, and I like it a lot better. I think we're far afield. I can't remember the question.
Well, yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I think you filled in all the parts that we need to know about rewriting something and why writers rewrite until their typewriters break down or their keyboards break down.
So let me say a couple of things. Neil Simon said writing is rewriting. That's something. Bill Bryson, I think it was, said he knows when he's done editing when he spends time struggling over robin's egg or cerulean, when he can't remember. So there comes a time when you just have to move on. But I also have a framed sheet of manuscript from Elizabeth. She gave all of us one year for Christmas. All of us got a page of an early draft of a novel where she had crossed out, just like you're saying. And I think it was, well, of course it was to show us the importance of doing that. And I would say also, and I got this from her, that at some point the editing should be done on a hard copy. Print it and read it, and rather than on the screen. And I don't know why it's different, but it is.
I think we've covered that. So
Okay.
let's go on to publishing.
Yeah.
You've talked a little about publishing your first novel. Then, did you try to get a publisher? Did you make efforts to get a publisher? Was the foundation that you got the grant from, did they try to get you a publisher?
Yeah.
How did that work?
No, I did it on my own, or I tried on my own. I sent out something like 100 queries, which is not all that unusual. I mean, sometimes you get lucky, but it's not unusual to do 100.
And when you sent out the queries, was it an outline of the story? Was it, I mean,
Yeah.
usually publishers have a fixed something that they need. Sometimes they're each
Right.
different, but you've got to give them what they're looking for to be able to make the choice whether they
Right.
want to see more or not.
Right. So this typically was not publishers, it was agents.
Okay.
But it's the same criteria. They have what they want to look at. Sometimes they want the first 50 pages, or they want the first 10 chapters. And along with that, typically they'll want a synopsis. And it's interesting, the synopsis is, it's not a running plot outline, but one thing is it's present tense, and it's stripped of all of the nuance, and you can't withhold anything. If there's a revelation at some point, you've got to tell them in the synopsis. You can't hope that they come back and ask for that later. So typically that's what I would send. And I did that, like I said, kind of 100 times. Right near the end, I was so discouraged because I had been following a particular agent, her newsletter or her blog or whatever. And at some point she said, I don't normally do this, but I'm looking for now a male confessional. Well, I'd never heard that term. And in reading the description, that's what I wrote. And in fact, she used as an example High Fidelity by Nick Hornby. And I thought, fabulous. And I don't think that this was up on her website a half an hour when I responded. And I wrote her right back and I said, I've written what you've just asked for. And I'd love to send you a sample or something. And I think it was the next day, I got a canned rejection. Thank you for contacting us and so on. And I thought, if it's not that I minded the rejection. If it would have said, thank you, but it doesn't really sound like you've done it, or thank you, but we've already filled that slot, or something, but to get the automatic response when she asked for that and I sent it to her, I was pretty discouraged. So I went on then to self-publish.
So let's talk a minute about self-publishing.
Yeah.
What were your expectations? You've gone from writing to agents who didn't accept your work, and perhaps you did try some publishers,
Yeah.
agent/publishers at that time, and now you decided to self-publish. Did you look at the factors involved with self-publishing, cost, and where do you expose the book, and how do you sell the book, and all of that?
I guess I sort of did. I mean, I didn't know anything. And self-publishing, I think it may be a little bit of a misnomer in this case. I think the actual term is hybrid publishing. And what that is you, the author, pays for the printing, and the person that you send it to, they do the management of it, they organize the printing and so on. And then they do the promotion. Well, that was a big deal because I don't know how to do that. And I was so naive. I made the mistake of telling this fella, I said, I've got X amount of money, that's all I can do. Well, guess what? That's exactly what it cost. and he wanted it up front. So anyway, I sent him the money, and I got the book, which I'm very happy with. But in the end, I was doing the promoting. And I remember one specific time we were going to go to Colorado, and see our daughter. And I said, would you set up a reading in, Colorado Springs? And at the time, the greater Colorado Springs area, the population was 600,000. And his answer was, we can't find anything. Now, you tell in 600,000 places, which then has schools and the libraries and museums, you can't find a place.
Bookstores.
And what an idea. A bookstore for a book reading. Anyway, I fired him. So that was that. But I learned a lot, and I have to say, I'm so glad that I did it for a couple of reasons. The stigma of self-publishing has really lessened. In fact, there are established authors who are buying the rights of their book back, their traditionally published book, buying it back because they do better self-publishing. So that's one thing. The other thing is, this is going to be hard to explain, but I got a feeling, having published this book, that I joined this cavalcade, this stream of authors for 100 years, 200 years. The sort of, now I'm one of them. And it was a good feeling. And the other thing is, I thought that the book was worth having out in public. And now it is. So that was a good feeling.
And can you give us a cautionary note about that type of self-publishing? What to not look for?
Well,
because it is also one of the kinds of self-publishing, as you've said.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to be not very effective and maybe a little bit of a scheme.
I honestly don't know any self-publishing business that and I'm going to get in trouble here, but that I would go with. A friend of mine, Karen Huntsberger, and I think she's used Luminary Press or Luminaire or something, and they do a great job, and she's happy with them and everything. Actually all three of these books, I sent to McNaughton and Gunn, which are printers, I think they're in Michigan.
Right.
Great quality. I can't say enough about them. And you know what? All things considered, it's not that expensive to have it printed. And so prior to that, you have to format it, which my friend Carrie Martin, thank you, Carrie, did that. And there's some, actually, the picture on this, my brother made a brand that I put in a fire and burned it into the side of my daughter's barn and took a picture of it. So you got to do all that. But in terms of cost and difficulty, it's not that bad. And I honestly, because in today's publishing world, probably you are going to do your own promotion anyway. I mean, I just do it myself.
Well, that's a good way to end that part of the conversation.
Okay.
Let's just leave it there. I want to talk to you about All Hat, your second book. And that's an interesting name for a book. How did you come upon that name?
Many years ago, I was in a conversation with some guys, and one fella said of another who wasn't present, but he said, "Oh, he's all hat." And I thought, well, that's interesting. What does that mean? And then he explained, the whole phrase is, he's all hat and no cattle. In other words, he's a fake. He's a poser. And obviously, I never forgot that. So that's where the name came from. The idea for the book, honestly, came from Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. I was driving from Southern California to San Jose, and that came on the radio. And there's a line in there that says, cowboys like smoky old pool rooms and clear mountain mornings, little warm puppies and children and girls of the night. And I thought, well, yeah, I like puppies. So, no, what I really thought was it's an illustration of all of us, human beings, and not just cowboys, hold contradictory tendencies or thoughts or actions. And so the one thing is, I thought that would be a fun, again, it's character driven, so that's a fun thing about a character. And the other thing is, I was highly influenced by Lonesome Dove. And I think, well, I know, to some extent, trying to create an updated version of Gus McCrae from Lonesome Dove. So that's how that happened.
One of the things I found wonderful about the book is that it contains scenes that give the reader detailed views of modern day ranch life.
Yeah.
And how did you collect the research for, let's say, the stock auction scene, or even better yet, the birth of the fawn on the highway?
Yeah. I knew I didn't know anything, and so I sought out. I called different veterinary places, and everybody was doing cats and dogs and birds and stuff. And I finally wound up with Frank Walton in Chino, California, and he is a large animal vet, and just the coolest guy. And I went and I interviewed him on several occasions, and on one of those, we were in his office, and he said, "We've talked enough, you need to get to work." So he gave me some muck boots, and we went out to, these are dairy cattle, not beef cattle, but a lot of similarities. And I was injecting the calves with antibiotics or whatever it was. And so we talked a lot about that, but then I wrote the scene with the fawn, and after I'd written it, I asked him, "Is this possible?" And then I had to rewrite it, but he walked me through, yes, it is, given urgency, you have to move right along to deliver it. But I just thought that was a great scene, and I think, again, it helps establish Owen's character. Owen's the protagonist. And so contradictory, he comes off as kind of gruff, but he's so caring about the fawn. And I thought that was something.
Yes, you put him on the page for the reader at that point.
Yeah.
And then we have that feeling about him that, at least for me, I liked the guy.
Sure.
Because he went through all of this trouble to birth this fawn in a way that was very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. And he's funny, he's not above complaining, but he'll do the work.
Yeah.
But now you ask about the auction, that was, I didn't know. In fact, I go back to Larry McMurtry. He says, "My job is to make stuff up." He didn't use the word stuff, but he said something like that. But no, I watched videos, and I sort of made it up. And actually, there's a scene in Murphy's Romance where there's an auction, and I kind of used some of that.
Well, it strikes me as very real. And not that I'm an expert about those kinds of things, but I thought that it flowed well in the story.
Yeah.
Let's get to what you're writing now. What are you doing now? Are you writing a book?
I just finished another novel. Very different for me. Again, if these are literary, that one's popular. Started as kind of a lark, in the vein of maybe the Spencer novels or Jesse Stone or something. It's a murder mystery, and I finished it. And our mutual friend Robert Brighton introduced me in a wonderful way to his publisher, and they have it now. So, but yeah, I just finished that.
And you say it's a crime novel or
Yeah.
a mystery novel.
Yeah.
And this is your first one?
It is, yeah.
And how did you find the writing of that? I mean, is it character development, or is there a plot? There's got to be plot in it.
There's a plot, and honestly, I'll just say, not to give too much away, but it's about human trafficking, and I don't know how I thought of that. Probably it was in the news or something, but again, it wasn't an exercise. It was just fun, and I was starting to write this thing. But the farther I got, the more fun it was. And I thought, darn, this might be cool. This might be something. So I kept going. Yeah.
And you think, I was going to ask you a question about what it's about,
Yeah.
the book, and if you wouldn't mind telling us what it's about, but you've already told us what it's about.
It's about that, and you know there are elements in that genre. Here's a spoiler: the good guys win. You know, I mean, so it's that kind of book. But and you may do the same thing. But when I'm reading at night, sometimes I don't want to read something too heavy, and these aren't. So that's what I wanted to recreate.
Do you have a piece of it that you could read to us?
I'm glad you asked. I do, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Boy, that worked out. How are we doing on time? We're all right. Yeah, so what I wanted to do with this is two things. We talked about voice. I wanted to establish a voice. And I think maybe it's a little noirish, I hope. And I also wanted to put the character on the page and have him do something. So
which is a clue from one of the writers that you've been following.
Yeah.
Put the character on the page,
Yeah.
let them do something,
Yeah.
and start out that way.
Yeah.
I think you told me.
Yeah.
Maybe the first page of the book.
Yeah. You know, and there's always different approaches. And I'm thinking of sometimes a great notion, which I haven't read for a long time, but if I remember right, there's some pages of description and scene setting, and that's lovely too. But I think maybe he was more confident than me. I didn't want to lose the reader, so I started off like this.
Okay.
And the title, which I came up with recently, A Death in Felicity. Saturday morning, early. The only sounds in Moss's trailer, waves collapsing against the shore below the bluff, and the occasional screech of a gull. He stretched and opened an eye, smiled at the thought of the day ahead, a day of sun and fishing, an easy weekend away from an easy job. He lay several minutes more until he finally pulled himself upright and swung his feet to the gritty floor. He swiped each foot once across a towel before stepping into his weekend uniform. Shorts, flip-flops, a cut-off sweatshirt. He measured coffee into the pot steel basket, then added a scoop for luck. With the campground's hookups, his trailer had 110, and Moss had a modern coffee pot on the list of things to purchase. But he hadn't gotten around to it yet, and it had been 3 years since he parked the trailer here. He set the pot on a burner and lit the propane flame, sat at the table, and opened a book. When the coffee smelled about right, he took the pot from the burner and poured a cup, added a drop of cream from the ice chest, and slipped on a nylon windbreaker. He started for the picnic table outside beside the trailer, but the night had been foggy and there was a sheen of moisture on the bench. Cup still in hand, he headed back inside to fetch a towel. By the time he returned to the table, Gil Martin was running down the path. "Jesus, I'm glad you're here," Martin said, out of breath. He was dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, pale blue with white stripes, loafers without socks. Martin was a short man with a willowy build, though Moss figured the mustache added about a pound. "And good morning to you too," Moss saluted with the cup. "Not for me it isn't, not for you either. You aren't going to like this one bit." Already Moss didn't like it. The tide was coming in, best time to cast into the waves. 2 weeks ago he'd landed at Dorado, not that that species had any business this far north, but that was the ocean for you. You never knew what you're going to get. "This can't wait until I get a first sip? What happened, a toilet overflow? Some kids set off fireworks?" But Martin had gone pale under his tan, and Moss got the feeling this problem wasn't going to be solved with a plunger. In answer, Martin poked a thumb over his shoulder. "Bottom of the hill," he said, still breathing hard. "Campers found her." Moss cocked his head. "Dead girl," Martin continued. "Deader than hell."
Wow. That's a grabber.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
And is that metaphor intended or not intended?
You never know what you're going to find?
Well, beside that, about catching the Dorado.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting that actually a friend who was an English teacher looked at a version of this and wanted more metaphor, more clues. And I thought, again, that's a good idea. It's just not for this book. But in hindsight, yeah, it is. It can be taken as even foreshadowing. Mm-hmm. But I think when I wrote it, I didn't know that.
Well, it's been great talking to you about this, and I hope everybody has enjoyed it. But I think it's about time that I turned the program back to you, the originator of the program,
okay.
and said thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Frank. This has been fun for me to be on this end of it. Folks, thanks for watching. And you know, a couple of things. If you, I'm just going to give you my email, stephen.w.long0110@gmail.com if you want to write to me. If you've got an idea for a guest or comment or something, give me a holler. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Frank, for doing this. And see you next time on The Writing Life. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Frank.